Hello, everybody. Welcome to our continuing series documenting our trip to the Baltic Sea in September of 2018. If you've missed any of the past episodes, there are links to each one of them in the description section below. And if you are caught up, then welcome to our second day in St. Petersburg, Russia. Please enjoy and please subscribe. Morning, everybody. It's Monday morning, and we are ready to do day 2 of St. Petersburg, but I'm going to run up and get something to eat real quick before we meet again in the atrium at 8:15. So, bon appetit.
As I arrived in the Garden Café, I realized that I was going to have a special guest for breakfast.
Well, look who's joining me for breakfast.
Dobre dia.
What'd you guys do last night?
Dobre utra. We had a nice dinner with Ted and Kathy and Mike and Colleen for their anniversary.
Oh, that's right. That's right. 29
years.
Yeah, wow.
On 9/9. So we
Manhattan room, right?
Yes.
Was it good?
Very good.
Crowded?
They're not crowded. You were able to get right in without a resident.
Look at this.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. There was a poisoning or something, and people just aren't here.
Well, how far is Moscow? You think people would have taken a train and stayed overnight just because?
I never even thought of that. Is that something we could do? Maybe.
I don't know.
That would have been interesting. Although we, had I already seen St. Petersburg, that would have been a cool thing to do. But St. Petersburg was freaking awesome.
Oh yeah,
that was great.
Plenty more to see. Yeah, I actually felt rushed going through the Hermitage, just because there's so much to see.
Yep.
After breakfast, Darin and I made our way out to the atrium to find our group.
Here's my people. Morning.
This was going to be our second day in St. Petersburg with our private tour guide, Anna, and we were scheduled to meet her in the little marketplace outside of immigration at 9 o'clock.
St. Petersburg day 2, and it's a lot different than yesterday, right? There's nobody here. Yesterday there was 1 million people here, so today this is going to go quickly. This is a lot different than yesterday, right?
People-wise?
People-wise.
Oh, yeah, people-wise.
Weren't we lined up like here when we started? Yeah, I think a lot of people don't go into town the second day. Where's Dana?
I found Dana frantically looking for her passport, which I had in my backpack.
You need me.
Get up here.
We still had a few minutes left until we were supposed to meet up with Anna, so we spent some time looking at the souvenirs in the small marketplace.
You can get yourself a tchotchke if you wish.
A bunch of the ladies were interested in getting some of those Russian wool hats, but here at the port they cost about $50, so nobody bought one.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Governor, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
You gonna get yourself a, what do they call these things?
Matryoshkas.
They also had about 1 million of those little Russian nesting dolls, you know, the dolls that inside them have other dolls, and inside those are even more dolls. They even had NFL dolls. I might have even bought one, but it seems that their knowledge of current NFL players is a little out of date.
Okay, Anna is here. Bus.
At 9 o'clock, Anna met us outside the marketplace, and we made our way over to the bus where we were greeted by our driver, Alexei. As we got on the bus and started our day, Ginny made the announcement that it had already been Elaine's birthday, Mike and Colleen's wedding anniversary, and Kelly and Darin's engagement anniversary. So she brought a little something for all of us to celebrate with.
So we brought 1 bottle of champagne.
Well, I forgot mine.
Everybody get a smell of the champagne.
As Jeff was rationing out the champagne, Darin and I started a terrible joke battle that would continue for about half of the day.
Hey Darin, did you hear about the new restaurant on the moon?
No, I did not.
Great food, no atmosphere. Thank you, I'm here all week.
Don't forget to tip me later.
Try the veal.
Try the finger being in the glass. I was told I had to stay seated.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You in trouble?
Yeah, I guess. I don't want to spill on you.
Devil.
It's weird. This building is on stilts.
Movies, that's right.
You're the best. I don't care what they're saying.
As I checked out my new Russian passport stamps, Ginny also passed out some Russian chocolate that she had purchased at the marketplace. It tasted great, but man, was it thin.
Chew it slowly.
Today, there were only going to be 18 of us. Ted and Kathy had decided to take the day to rest and relax on the ship. We eventually made our way back down to the Neva River where we saw some familiar sights from the day before. I'm always fascinated by how stoplights work in different countries. Here in St. Petersburg, I like the timer that shows you how long until the light changes, even when it's green.
Okay, your jacket?
The Neva River, which runs along St. Petersburg, splits directly across from the Winter Palace at the site of the old stock exchange. More than 200 years ago, two 32-meter-high rostral columns were built to serve as beacons marking the two channels of the river. At the bottom of the two statues sit four allegorical figures representing the four major rivers in Russia. Originally, at the top of the columns were large bowls to burn oil. These were later changed to electric lamps, but those became very expensive. In 1957, the lamps were changed to gas burners and are still lit on special occasions. As we were taking pictures of the columns, a Russian salesman started hassling us, and boy was this guy in the right place at the right time. He was selling those furry Russian hats that they were selling back at the port, but this guy was selling them for only $20. About 6 people bought these things, including Lee. In fact, at one point, Lee had so many of these things, he looked like he might go into business for himself.
How much for your hats, sir?
I'll sell this one for 20.
So Dana spent $20 on a hat that makes her even blonder.
Well, inside the, wherever the passport dump out there, those were like $80, $90, $120.
Oh my God, she got that one for $20.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's probably fake. Hopefully it's fake.
For $20?
I hope it's fake.
Do you have one more white one?
Let me get a picture of you 3, 4. If you don't have a hat on, you can't be in the picture.
Yeah, smile and say something in Russian, like dressing or something.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes.
So as they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in Russia, buy a silly fake hat.
Back across the river, more in the neighborhoods that we had spent most of yesterday, we stopped to visit the St. Nicholas Naval Cathedral. This Baroque Orthodox cathedral was built in the mid-1700s and is closely associated with the Russian Navy, including memorials to the crews of various sunken Soviet submarines. We were allowed inside where a sacred chant with a small chorus of singers was being performed, but they asked that no cameras be involved. A couple people in our group did capture some video of the event, but I've decided not to show it here in order to conform to the wishes of the cathedral. Our next stop was going to be the Catherine Palace, which was about 20 miles outside of town, but it took us about an hour to get there on the bus with traffic. We arrived on the property of the Summer Palace at about 11:40 a.m., and once again we thanked our lucky stars for having a private tour guide. Instead of going to the main entrance where 10,000 people waited, we went to the tour bus entrance where nobody was and waited for about 4 minutes while Anna went to pick up our reserved tickets. Catherine I commissioned a German architect to build her a summer palace in 1717. In 1743, her daughter, Empress Elizabeth, thought the palace to be outdated and so had the old building demolished and rebuilt to her standards over a 4-year period ending in 1756. When Catherine the Great became empress in 1762, she had her own additions to the summer palace. But upon her death in 1796, the palace was abandoned, with the next monarchs preferring to reside at the Alexander Palace about a quarter mile away. There was a great fire in 1820 which destroyed a section of the palace, and it was pretty much completely destroyed at the end of World War II. The Germans had been using the palace as a base and completely burned it out at the end of the war. but there are stories that the Russians themselves burned the palace in order to get the Germans out. At any rate, the palace is currently undergoing reconstruction to return it to its former glory. We entered the palace right before noon, and as we entered, Darin dropped another terrible joke on me.
When you're on your way to the restroom, you're Russian. When you're there, European.
The battle of bad jokes continues.
It's been served.
As we went through security, I had a personal snafu. As I was off filming all of my shots, Anna had told the group that we were not allowed to bring a backpack of any kind and no tripods. Well, this was a bummer because shooting a documentary like this, everything is in my backpack. But I was forced to head to the coat check area to check in all of my equipment, and by the time I got back to security, my group had left. I was stuck there for more than 20 minutes with nobody speaking English before I was eventually escorted ahead to reunite with my group. After putting on my very fashionable shoe booties, I finally caught up with the group at the Golden Corridor. Maybe you can see why they call it that. The most notable room along this hallway is the Amber Room, which is decorated entirely, well, by amber. Unfortunately, no cameras are allowed while inside this famous chamber. Along the corridor, we found ourselves surrounded by lots of gold and portraits of Empresses Elizabeth and Catherine the Great. These particular formations were in the corners of every room. It turned out that these are stoves for heating. Here is a painting of the Great Fire from 1820. And these photos are from the fire at the end of World War II. This is what the Golden Corridor and the Amber Room looked like after the Nazis got through with it. Fortunately, Russian historians had photographed every inch of the palace in order to help in its later reconstruction. Speaking of the Amber Room, here are some photos from inside the Amber Room so maybe you can get an idea of what it looks like. And here are some amber souvenirs available in the gift shop. Before we left the palace, Dana played roulette with the cash machine in order to get a few more rubles. We left the palace out of the back entrance and ventured into the gardens. As always, folks have the opportunity to take a photo with a native. As we made our way back to the bus, we passed by another massive wave of tourists just on their way into the palace. Here we passed by a statue of Russian poet Alexander Pushkin. At a little after 1, we drove a short distance to our lunch stop. Anna took us to a place where they sold meat pies. Now, the closest thing I've ever had to a meat pie is like a chicken pot pie, which is actually really good. But when we travel, we always take the time to try out the local cuisine and local customs. It turns out that meat pies are awesome. My pie was filled with steak and mushrooms, while Dana's was filled with chicken and rice.
I got a cherry, 2 tiny still waters, but really cheap, right?
As we finished our lunch, Dana told me about a little problem that she had in the bathroom.
The restrooms are that way.
They're downstairs, behind you.
Walk down the stairs and it's all in Russian. It doesn't really, and I don't know what, male, female. So I walked into there and it's like, okay, cool. There's wash basins and there's doors. So I go to the bathroom and then I get out and I'm washing my hands and then the gentleman walks downstairs and he looks in at me and I'm thinking, is this the gentleman's? I don't know if this is men's. He said yes. And so I said, go ahead. You've been in there and went to the bathroom.
So is it just unisex, you think?
I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But we both used it, so.
We're probably both in the men's room.
After that restaurant we saw in Berlin, anything goes in this place.
That was crazy.
I got Anna's attention to tell her that somebody, who I thought was her sister, had helped me catch up to our group in the palace.
Did your sister call you? Did your sister call you? Yeah,
Like
today?
No.
Because I saw her when I was being held by security, your sister comes in, and she looks right at me, and I'm like, hi. And then they said something to her in Russian. They mentioned your name. They said, Anna, blah, blah, blah. They were pointing, and then she turned around and walked back. And then like 5 or 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later,
Are you sure that's her?
it was her. They mentioned your name. She looked just like you. Her hair was a little straighter. Is she here today? Is she not here today?
No. I haven't talked to her today, but she was supposed to have a day off.
Oh, no kidding. Well, talk to your parents. You may have a triplet.
At 2 o'clock, we were back on the bus and heading back into town. Nearly an hour later, we arrived at the amazing Peterhof Palace complex, which contains a number of small palaces and a massive garden area. As Anna got our tickets, I took a quick second to jot down all of the things that you can't do while inside the garden.
That's a lot of rules.
Once we entered the gardens, the view was pretty freaking breathtaking. There is a large main palace at the top of the hill, and then the incredible Samson Fountain directly below it. We all had earpieces in so that Anna could tell us about what we were seeing. Being that the garden is 500 acres and has 144 fountains, to truly explore this site would have taken at least a day. We had about an hour. In the center of the main fountain is a gold statue of Samson tearing open the mouth of a lion. This fountain was built in 1730 and represents Russia's victory over Sweden in the Great Northern War, which ended 9 years earlier. The Swedish coat of arms happens to have a bunch of lions on it, and one of the largest victories happened on St. Samson's Day. This next fountain is called Checkerboard Hill and is another cascade fountain, which protects 2 caves. The cave at the bottom is protected by the cascading water, and the one at the top is protected by 3 dragons. Peter the Great was known for his love of practical jokes, and in this garden, he pulls several of them upon unsuspecting visitors. This small passageway would completely soak passers-by with water fountains if they weren't careful.
I mean, you can see the jets all over the ground right there.
Water from these small jets shoots over the entire road. Now, these fountains go off 3 times a day. Nearby is another trick fountain. This seems like a lovely place to sit and read a book while looking at the trees. But right in the middle of the Pushkin poem that you're reading, you get soaked with water from behind the bench and out of the trees. In the gardens outside of Montplaisir Palace, we came across another trick fountain. It seemed to be just a small collection of rocks with a bench to sit on and enjoy the gardens. But if you get too close to it, a bunch of us, including Lee here, took turns trying to cross this small patch of rocks without getting soaked with various degrees of success. It seems that Dana was the only one that was really able to do it right. But there's a trick. If you don't want the trick spoiled, please fast forward in this video until the red spoiler alert graphic at the top is gone. Are you ready? You've been warned. Okay, it all has to do with this very innocent-seeming gentleman sitting right here listening to music. Now, I'm sure he actually is listening to music in those headphones of his, but he is not here just to enjoy the view. No, you see, he has his foot on top of a small pedal, which activates the fountain's jets. The harder he presses it, the higher the jets shoot. What a fun job. Well, in order to get the whole story of the shot of Dana walking across the fountain undrenched, we'll need to back up a few seconds. Dana simply walked up to the guy and tipped him about $10 to let her walk across the rocks without getting soaked. We got one of the only shots of someone actually walking safely across the trick fountain, and the water fountain guy got $10. Everyone's a winner. Maybe if you ever come here, you can use this information to soak your friends while you walk across the fountain safely. At this point, we had about 15 minutes until we were supposed to meet back at the entrance of the gardens where we came in. So we just sort of turned around and started heading back in the opposite direction of what we had been doing. We passed by Adam's Fountain and then eventually got a glimpse of the main palace and Samson Fountain. We headed up the steps and got to our meeting place. Or at least, most of us did.
So now we're in a bit of a quandary. We're all ready to leave the palace, leave this park, and Elaine and Lee have not shown up. They were with us when we came sort of out of... Right back there was a fountain of Adam that I just took a picture of, and they were kind of with us there, and then never made it back here. So Anna is trying to reach them on the headset, and we're looking for them. Lee's wearing a salmon-colored shirt, but we can't see them.
Lee and Elaine were somehow missing, and so Anna started to try and reach them on the headset things that we were wearing, but those things only have a range of about 30 meters, and we weren't getting an answer from them. So a couple of search parties were sent out. I took my camera so that I could zero in and use it like binoculars to try and see them.
Yeah, they said they saw them at the Fountain of Adam, which isn't that far in there. Maybe they just took a right instead of a left, or, I mean, we were just kind of walking straight past it.
But even if you walk out in the wrong direction, you see the palace anyways, and you know that you need to get back to the palace and go upstairs here.
Yeah, I mean, you can't miss the palace. And even if they were lost, they could ask somebody, how do you get back to the palace?
They can't hear me if I'm like more than 30 meters away.
Yeah, even those people down there can't hear you. Yeah. Well, this is kind of scary because the boat's going to leave. And we got to find them.
After about 15 minutes of serious heart palpitations for everybody, I got a message from Anna through my headphones.
Uh-oh, wait a minute. Maybe there's life in this story. They're on the bus. Lee, Elaine, you're on my list. I don't have a list. I'm making a list, and you two are on it.
Now that everybody was finally accounted for, we made our way back through the marketplace so that we could take our bus back to the ship.
There's our bus.
We arrived back at the port at about 5:15, and since this was our final day here in St. Petersburg, we were forced to say goodbye to Anna and our driver, Alexei.
Happy birthday again.
If you are interested in using this particular tour company, I will leave their phone number in the comments section below.
We could ask questions.
Yeah.
It's an option. I'll consider it.
We had time for one last group picture before heading back to our ship.
Okay, everybody on 1, 2, 3, spasibo. Okay, or just yell it out.
All right, you guys. Thank you.
Inside the marketplace, we took a last look around to see if there was one last trinket to take home with us. This beautiful skyscraper that you keep seeing is the Lochte Center. It is the tallest building in Europe and is currently still under construction with an opening date in late 2019 or 2020.
Hello, Welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
Water.
Water?
Water.
Not vodka?
No vodka.
There's a vodka.
There's which one? Get lucky.
Juice if you're lucky.
In the evening, Dane and I decided to try another one of the specialty restaurants on board the ship.
Young lady.
Hello.
Hello.
Again, these are restaurants that are not included in the price of your cruise. But that was okay since Dana had made about $300 in the casino right before dinner. Le Bistro is a French restaurant with a great menu and a really nice wine list. For her appetizer, Dana had the steamed mussels and I had the seafood medley with puff pastry and lobster bisque.
And of course I've ordered my Bloody Mary. But it comes with a straw. I stole from Russia, and I'm going to drink my drink like a civilized human being. Thank you very much.
For our next course, Dana had a dinner salad and I had the baked onion soup.
What did you want again?
I got the duck.
Oh, you did?
It's in there somewhere. I think it's underneath.
It might be underneath.
And for her main course, Dana got the duck and I got the beef tenderloin. We finished our fantastic dinner at about 10:30 and headed back to our room to call it a day. But before we ever got there, I decided to give Dana a little surprise.
Who's your best friend in this whole room?
You are.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. What did you leave on the chair?
My $300. Thank you.
After 2 fantastic and exhausting days in St. Petersburg, we dragged ourselves back to the room and called it a night at about 11:15.
If you'd like to book this trip or anything like it, please call Dapple Destinations at the number on your screen. And if you have any questions, please enter them in the comment section below. And as always, please like and subscribe to our channel by clicking our little picture here on the side. And we'll see you next time.